João Esteves, welcome to the Earthy Lights podcast. What's the crack?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here with you. I'm good at the moment, very, very good. I'm in Portugal, in Lisbon, in a small village close to the Lisbon city center, and the weather is really, really nice, really warm. I know we cannot enjoy the sunshine and the beach as we used to here in Cascais because of the COVID pandemic crisis, but it's a beautiful day here. What about you?
Beautiful. I can't. The weather. Well, I was going to say I can't complain. I actually am going to complain that it's too hot, but that's just a personal thing. In Madrid, it's like 35 degrees, and on Sunday it's going to be 42 degrees.
That's too much.
And there's no seaside fresh air that you two have got both in Dublin and in Lisbon. So I'm suffering over here. But apart from that, all good, all groovy. João, I think this is probably maybe the hardest question we always ask is right at the very start of the podcast. But for listeners who maybe haven't heard of you or haven't come across your work, could you just describe to us a bit about your background and what it is that you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my background is in psychology, in applied psychology. So I'm a chartered clinical psychologist, and in the last 15 years, or since I finished my master's degree, I've been working mainly in social intervention projects around Lisbon city center, mainly in the private areas, I'm very interested in social inclusion issues, trying to tackle them, trying to develop projects related with employability supports, education, training, try to bring people together, creating partnerships and networks so that our interventions in these kind of contexts could be more consistent and effective. I've also done work as a practitioner in private practices, like a psychotherapist, and currently I'm working as a sports psychologist as well, because I've been working 13 years in Portugal. I've been 2 years and a half working abroad, 5 months in London, 2 years in Ireland, in Dublin, and in 2019 I become a dad. So I have a little girl named Rita, but she was born in Portugal just before COVID got in. And since then, I started to work again as a sports psychologist, so working with athletes to help them improve their performances in different sports. And I'm also doing some consultancy work to help people in Cascais that work in the private areas to develop some social intervention projects in an effective way. So I'm also working as a consultant at the moment.
Oh, lovely stuff. And congratulations on your daughter.
Thank you so much.
The title of the podcast is Social Prescribing. And there might maybe some of our listeners who aren't aware of what that term actually means. I'm just wondering, before we kind of get into the weeds of it all, could you just give us kind of a definition of what that term means?
Yeah. So social prescribing is it seems to be a new concept, but actually it is not a new concept. It's something that is used, and that it was, I think, I'm not making a big mistake if I told you that social prescribing in the UK exists for maybe 15 years. So it's something that is relatively new in countries like the Republic of Ireland, Portugal, but there are a lot of English-speaking countries that actually use social prescribing as a complementary service to what the medical services provide to people. Just in simple words, when you go to a doctor, and I can give you a formal definition, but maybe we can start like this. When we go to see our GP, we usually go there and expect to get a tablet or a medication for our condition or for the reason that brought us to see the GP. but sometimes, and it's not just sometimes, very frequently, there are people that actually go to their GPs once or twice a week, or maybe more in some cases, and they don't really need the GP's help in terms of their medical condition, because they may have let's say a long-term condition that is already controlled by medication, like a diabetes type 2 patient who gets his medical treatment regularly, but still he or she insists and go there and talk with the GP about stuff like feeling slightly depressed or inactive or lonely or even socially isolated. These may be some of the reasons why people look for attention from GPs, and most of the time GPs don't have any answers in terms of, there are no tablets that fix loneliness or social isolation, at least at the moment. I don't think there is any tablet for that to fix that kind of issues, or even unemployment, or even a housing issue. So there are a few reasons, or we call it social determinants of health. So it's social reasons that interfere with our health and well-being that sometimes GPs can't offer any kind of answer in terms of medication. So people keep going to the GP in searching for an answer that they cannot give them. So that's when social prescribing gets in. So it's a way of enabling GPs to refer people to a link worker. This is the name that you give to someone who makes a connection between the health sector and the community sector. And this person will have time to listen to what are the main concerns of the person at that particular time of their lives. The link worker will also have interests and should be able to listen actively to what actually concerns that person. And after this first conversation, the link worker main role is to help people understand or find out that there are some resources in the community. Some of them are offered by community centers, some of them are offered by sports centers, some are offered by senior citizens club, gardening, education or training facilities. It depends. You could have a lot of reasons that may be concerning people's lives, and this of course will have impact in their well-being, that the link worker can help them to, first of all, let them know that these amount of services exist, these amount of options are available, and then we will help people to connect with these services if they want to. It's not something that we are obliged to do. We don't pressure people to, no, listen, if you're feeling inactive, you should do 2 times a week, like moderate physical activity or intense physical activity, because that will help you to increase your physical activity levels. You will become more happier. We don't do that kind of stuff. We can help people to understand how important it could be, but at the same time, I think the main role is to listen to people and let them know that there are actually options that they can take avail of, or even they can even just get the knowledge about it, get more awareness to people, or educate them about what's going on in the community, and then they can on their own explore those options, or they can get our, when I say our, it's the link workers support, to get to those supports, to meet with people who are actually developing some initiatives like Tai Chi classes or community gardening, or play the piano or painting classes or literacy skills. And because sometimes people, even though people could be motivated to engage in stuff like this, they may be afraid to try the first time and go on their own. And a link worker can also make the connection, like a physical connection with the service, and help people go there and support in this kind of way. So social prescribing in general is a way of linking the health sector with the community and volunteer sector through a link worker. and this is a job that not only helps people and the patients improve their health and well-being, but it's also a way of increasing the awareness of doctors, GPs, nurses about what's going on in the community, because they are so busy that sometimes they don't have time to know what's going on around the place where they are working. And at the same time, we are also helping the community services and the community sector to get more participants in their own activities. So it's a model of intervention that I could say it's an innovative way of health and well-being promotion, and it's like I said in the beginning, a service that is a support to a GP, because it can help them to approach or to look at some of the reasons that are interfering with a person's well-being in a way that they don't have time to do it. So it's something, I don't know if it's clear or if you understood the explanation. Was it simple? Was it too complex? No.
No, I really appreciate that, João. I'm pretty sure our listeners will as well. When I first heard social prescribing, I thought this is fantastic because this is a move towards the idea that we need a holistic health approach. Like you said, there are no tablets that are going to fix social isolation. There are many tablets that aren't so effective in fighting some of the issues that we're dealing with as a society. And I just thought this is fantastic. This link worker seems so important in identifying a person's needs. Like you said, the GP is very busy, and the GP is driven to give very often medicines as a way to treat physical symptoms. But this link worker seems like such a crucial role, and it's lacking to. I know you say it's growing in Ireland, but when I heard about social prescribing, I thought, oh my God, how is this not? How is this not everywhere? Like, how is this? Like, what? I guess, and so my mind, I got really excited when I heard about it, and I guess the one question I wanted to ask just straight away was, were you surprised to find out about the benefit, like just how big the benefits can be to social prescribing, and just how many conditions or ailments or problems that people have? How were you surprised with the amount that social prescribing can touch many of these issues?
Because even as a clinical psychologist, and this is actually it was interesting because when I moved to Dublin, and I can tell you a little bit about my story in terms of how did social prescribing cross my path in terms of my career path. So before I moved to Dublin, I stayed 4 or 5 months I moved to London and stayed there for 4 or 5 months. And I was very lucky because I found a partnership. It's called Lambeth Wellbeing Portuguese Partnership. So it's a group of people that work in a borough called Lambeth that has a lot of Portuguese migrants living there. And I thought, well, my wife was working in UCL, in the University College of London at the time, and I wasn't working. So I thought, why not learning a little bit more about what's going on in Lambeth and with the community living here, and maybe I could volunteer and help in some way because I'm Portuguese. I have some experience working in social intervention projects. Who knows if I could be helpful? And then I came across with this partnership. And once I started to learn about the work that they do, I realized that social prescribing was already embedded in the way the GPs were working, some of the community centers were working. So it was a central concept in the way that this partnership was working. Because it mainly this is about connections, bringing people together, bringing services together, bringing the health sector and the community sector that usually are not so close as they should be, and social prescribing brings that kind of glue between these two main areas. And I realized that basically, like you said, why this doesn't happen everywhere? Like, this should be happening everywhere, because it makes total sense. It doesn't make sense that this is not happening in Portugal and in other places. So after 5 months, we decided to move to Ireland, to Dublin. And when I started to look for job opportunities, the first one that came up was actually for a social prescribing coordinator. And it was still a pilot project at the time. And I thought, okay, because this actually matches my skill set and the things that I've been learning in London. So it might be a good job opportunity to apply for. And that's what I did. So I applied for it, and I was, I guess, a mixture between luck and the fact that my experience, professional experience, matched what they were looking for. And then I had the chance to coordinate and make projects happen from scratch. Like that particular social prescribing project that is called Get Well Connected. We thought that we could give it a name because social prescribing is not an easy concept to understand unless we have this kind of conversations. So that's why we thought, okay, if we change the name for something that make people think about the importance of connections to promote health and well-being, maybe people can understand a little bit more or a little bit better what social prescribing means. And then I actually had that chance, and it was a great and brilliant experience, professional experience, because I didn't know anything about Dublin. I didn't know anything. I mean, I have been there before on holidays, but I basically landed in Dublin, and 1 week later I was starting to work in a new organization and starting to work in a new project that the organization didn't have at the time. And it was a huge challenge, but it was really, really interesting because I was advocating for social prescribing with a lot of different stakeholders in the health sector, in the community and volunteer sector, and trying to educate GPs about the concept and telling them how important it could be and how this could also help them to ease the pressure on their work, because they have a lot of, like, the frequent, they call it, there's a way of calling the patients that usually go a lot of times to GPs. They are the frequent attenders. So the frequent attenders are usually consume usually about 20 to 30% of GP's time in consultations. So once we start to work with the social prescribing service, we expect that the frequent attenders start to reduce the number of appointments with a GP, because they realize that there are actually other options within their communities that they can take avail of and that are actually tailored to some of their needs. And this gives more space or more time to GPs to look and pay more attention to other patients that actually have medical conditions to be treated. So just to answer to your question, yes, I was very surprised about the amount of benefits that a service like this can bring, not only to healthcare professionals, to community services, but mainly to people. It's amazing how we can promote health and well-being just by making connections between stuff that is going on in the community. So people, sometimes it's just next door and people don't know that it's there. And the link worker is a facilitator in this sense, because the link worker has to be updated about all the services that are going on and all the initiatives. And this is a huge challenge, because when you work in the community sector, there are a lot of activities, a lot of services that change, like every trimester, or every 2 months, or every 3 months, or every 4 months, they change activities. So you have to know what's going on, so you can signpost or you can refer people accordingly to what's going on, because otherwise you will be telling people that, oh, listen, there's a stroke support group going on in Tala Community Center and running on Thursday mornings. But if this stroke group ends and you don't know that it ended, you're basically giving a wrong information to a person. So you don't want to do that. So you need to be always updated about what's going on, and that's a lot of work as well. But it's amazing the potential of a social prescribing service, mainly in primary care centers, in hospitals as well, in some hospital departments. And once I got the chance to tell people what is social prescribing, how it can benefit their service, I started to get a lot of phone calls from people who actually knew that I was promoting that service, and they wanted to know how they could connect with the social prescribing service, how could they refer people to the social prescribing service. But because it was a pilot project, we couldn't, and it was only me doing it in that organization. I couldn't accept referrals from other places than the two healthcare centers that we were working with. And but I can tell you a little bit more about it because it was a pilot and we needed to evaluate the effectiveness of the project in two specific areas in Dublin South. But the interest is growing and growing and growing, and now there are a lot of, I know I'm still following up some of the projects in Ireland, though I've moved to Portugal, and I know it's like mushrooms. There are a lot of social prescribing projects growing in different parts of the country, which is great. So yeah, it's something that is growing in the Republic of Ireland, and I'm glad that I did just even a little bit to make it grow. So I'm very proud of it.
And João,
yeah.
Was there a particular demographic that you saw that was in particular need of social prescribing, or that benefited particularly from social prescribing, be that an age range or maybe a sex? Was there a demographic that benefited most?
Yeah.
Or needed it most?
Yeah, so it's actually a good point, a good question, because there is definitely a cohort of patients that benefit with social prescribing, but it depends on the location where the service is. That's why I was telling you that I was working with two healthcare centers. One was located in a very deprived area, and the other one was located in a more affluent area. So the issues and the reasons for referral were very different from one healthcare center to the other, even though they were separated by maybe 5 miles or something. So they were very close, but the context where they were based, or the involvement was of those primary care centers, was very different. So I would say that in the more affluent area, I would say that older people over, not saying that people with 55 years old are old, but there are a lot of activities and a lot of services and initiatives for people over 55 years old. And this is actually something that a link worker also realizes. Sometimes there are gaps in terms of the options available for some cohorts of people, and there are some age groups that are not that don't have as much options as other options for people over 55 years old. So we had, I could tell you that in this clinic where I was working in this affluent area, older people were, I think they took more avail of the project because they were most of them were feeling very lonely or socially isolated, or looking for places where they could do some physical activity or some specific activities related with long-term conditions. But mainly people were at the time looking for getting more socialization, getting to know other people, spending more time with other people and less time on their own in their houses, like cleaning or dealing with their garden. They were looking for to know other people that usually they only made a nod when they cross with each other on the streets. And after I can give you an example of something that I think we created and had a lot of impact. And this was a walking group. We developed a walking group in a surgery. So there's a practice walk in this particular surgery in this more affluent area, because the GPs bought the idea of social prescribing really, really well, and their mindset in terms of this kind of holistic approach, like Jim said, was already there. So it was easier to make the social prescribing service work, and even the referrals were more what is the word that I'm looking for? They worked. The referrals were more sharp than in the other primary care center, because they actually realized, and they really knew really well their patients, and they realized their needs, their social needs. So once they referred the patient, most of the times they nailed it. They were social prescribing ready. This is another thing that I can tell you about. Not everyone is ready for social prescription, but we can talk about this further on. But just to let you know, the healthcare professionals were very, very interested in the concept and making it work. So we had a day, and there's still a day to celebrate Social Prescribing International Day. I think it's 14th of March. And to celebrate this day, I challenged them in the surgery, like the staff in the reception, the GPs, the practice nurse, the practice manager, to organize a walking group. And of course, we wanted the patients to come as well. And this walking group was to happen just once per month during the GP's lunchtime, because they are so busy that the only time they had available to join this walking group was during lunchtime. And they accepted the challenge. And we had, the first time we went for the walk, we only had 3 patients. And those patients were the ones that we were not expecting to get, because they were already very motivated. We wanted the other patients that actually needed to increase their physical activity levels. So we got the first ones we got this walking group were people who actually were used to run and do marathons. So we thought, okay, this is a good thing to start, but this is not our target, but let's go. So we went for the walk. It went really, really well. The next month we got, instead of 3 patients, we got 5, because they started to talk about the walk. People started to see GPs on the streets walking with a group of people, and they didn't realize what was going. They didn't understand why the doctors were walking with a group of people during lunchtime. And then people started to talk about it. And after 5 or 6 months, every first Friday of the month, we joined. And after 5 or 6 months, we had a group of 18 people joining the walking group, including the doctors and the practice nurses. And we realized that this was not just the physical activity part of it, it was the social component of it, because people walked, people talked, people felt happy, and they found a place and a time and a moment to leave their houses just for half an hour. And it was not a long walk. It was not a brisk walk. It was a walk that was welcome. We welcomed everyone. So, and the fact that the GPs were there was even better, because people felt safe, just in case you could fell, or sometimes people, like the older patients, were afraid of engaging in walking groups, because they didn't feel confident enough, because sometimes they walk too fast, or if they trip and fell, they won't have anyone to support them. So the fact that they have the GPs on board, the fact they have people, we had people with crutches, we had people with strollers, and I'm not joking. I have photos. If you like, I can send you. It's like the impact of a practice walk on a clinic. It was amazing. It was huge because other kind of connections started to happen just because we set up this walking group, and people start to talk with each other, and then they realize, okay, but you're attending this women's group and they knit in this women's group. Yeah, well, I like to knit, so maybe I'll join. And they started to some social prescriptions happened during the walking group as well. It was not just on one-to-one sessions. Just to give you a quick example of how a simple activity could bring people together, and it helped a lot of people who were, and this was before COVID. So we had a lot of people who were actually isolated at home. I remember this man who I think he was 57 years old, and he basically was living on his own, spent most of his time in front of a computer. He didn't like to be with other people. He didn't felt that he had conversation to have with other people. And we challenged him to attend this walking group. It was just once per month in the beginning, and he made it. He was the first person to arrive, the last person to leave, and it was the first step to help him get out of the house 2 to 3 days a week and to change his routine just with the walking group. This is just a small example. I could tell you about Men's Shed. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, but maybe this could also be just give you a suggestion for another podcast. Talk with someone that is related. Yeah, because it's. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I think it was in 2018 or 2019. The Men's Shed Association in Ireland won an award for the best practice in terms of men's mental health support in Ireland. So this, I don't know if you know the concept of a men's shed.
Give us the example for listeners who maybe don't know.
Okay, so a men's shed is a place, and if you Google it, you will find a lot of pinpoints on Google Maps all over the Republic of Ireland. It's a place where men can talk shoulder to shoulder while building stuff, doing manual stuff like working with wood or carpenter stuff. And it's almost like an occupational time where men can build something, talk with each other. I think there's a saying in Ireland that says something like this: men don't talk face to face, they talk shoulder to shoulder. Is it right? Is this something like this? I think this is. I mean, I learned this in Ireland, so if it's not this sentence, it's very close or similar to it. So the men's shed concept is based on this. So usually men are more closed. They don't talk much as women about their emotions, and the men's shed were places that were created. I think this is a model that was imported from Australia, and it is actually a huge success in the Republic of Ireland because it tackles loneliness and social isolation, and people can just it's for free. You can join for free, or even if you have to pay like five euros per week just for a cup of coffee or tea or biscuits, and you can just go there. I know that men's sheds work differently. They have different timetables and organizations according to the place where they are based. But it's actually a place where you can develop some skills, learn how to work with wood if you don't know how to do it. You can learn with other people, or you can teach other people how to work with wood and transform stuff and create new stuff. And it's a really, really interesting place that I signpost and refer people to, usually men, of course. and it's a very, very useful and a brilliant idea, a useful resource that exists in the Republic of Ireland for men who are over 18 years old, feeling lonely and isolated. It could be an option. I'm not saying that every man should take avail of it, but it's an option that is also available in the community. Sorry.
Sorry, when you were talking there, you were talking about how some of the guests, some of the patients who you refer to, the man with 57 sitting in front of his computer, and I think a lot of our listeners are younger than maybe 57, but they kind of have that similar behavior where if it's not the computer, it's their mobile. And I think, obviously with social media, we all think that we're more connected than ever, but how many of those connections, how much of that communication is actually quality communication? And I was wondering, did you find in your work and in your research that younger people were maybe inadvertently or not knowing that they were suffering from social isolation and loneliness because they have so many followers and they talk to their friends on WhatsApp all the time? That's very different to, like you said, in a walking group or building a shed or whatever it is, and actually being present with someone and actually having a real conversation with someone. And I find as well, Jim and I have been talking recently, and I've kind of thrown myself into a lot of new things, jiu-jitsu, new football groups, and where I have to meet new people. But a lot of my friends my age, they haven't taken up a new hobby in a long, long time. I mean, they're basically, I'm 25, but they have this idea of who they are, and they don't go beyond that. So their circle of friends or communication or connection is kind of all enclosed, and they're not willing to open that. And I was wondering if you've seen that in youngsters, and if you think that social prescribing is a way of kind of combating that and being able to open and having more connections.
Yeah, definitely. It's another very, very good question. And definitely, I to be honest, most of the referrals that I got were from older people. Okay, from people over 35, 40 years old. But I remember two particular cases. One was 18 or 19 years old. This young man was suffering from severe anxiety. And I think he had hyperactivity. Yeah, hyperactivity. PDHD, I think this is the correct name of it in English. And I'm not sure if he also had, ADHD. Thank you. ADHD. And I also think he was on the
ADHD
autism spectrum. So it was a blend of different conditions. And he was mainly a guy with a lot of anxiety. And this is interesting because social prescribing could also be helpful for this podcast, because I could tell you a little bit more about some resources that I found in Ireland that could also be interesting for you guys and for the people that you know. And maybe another suggestion for another podcast. There was an organization called Beacon of Light, okay, who developed a very interesting program with young men called Breakthrough Program, okay. And this Breakthrough Program was a mixture between sports and psychotherapy and counseling sessions to help people who were a little bit lost in their career paths, in their personal paths. So they try to bring together sports and a personal and social development component. And at least during the period that I was living and working in Ireland, I realized that Beacon of Light organized two different programs: the Breakthrough Program with kickboxing as the main sport, and I think that the person who was involved in in facilitating the sessions was one of the guys who was working with Conor McGregor, something Kavanagh. So you may know him. I can't remember the name. I'm sorry.
John Kavanagh.
Yeah. And the other Breakthrough Program was was worked in partnership with the FAI, with Football Association of Ireland. So it was one program was basically aimed for kickboxing, and the other one was aimed for football. Or in that it was 5 aside, not 11 aside. But through football and through kickboxing, or mainly through sports, the breakthrough program were able to bring young men together and talk about stuff that they usually don't talk with anyone. And they always had like physical activity and sports involved. They had this big component, but at the same time they had also group meetings and one-to-one sessions with particular counselors. And this young man that I told you about benefited from this. And the fact that he engaged in this activity and give it a shot helped him a lot by realizing that he was not alone in his kind of anxiety condition, and that was something that other young men were also suffering from. And we were not talking about, again, we were not in COVID times yet. This was before COVID. There were a lot of people spending most of their times it was not only in their houses, it was in their bedrooms. So they almost didn't leave the bedroom to eat. Some of them were eating inside of the bedroom, because they felt that they didn't have anywhere to go, or they didn't know what kind of resources were available for them. Even education and training courses. There are a lot of, there's an expression, I think I'm not wrong by saying it's the NEET, NEET young men, like neither in employment, education, or training. There's a lot of offers in terms of education and training available, and the organization where I worked, South Dublin County Partnership, had a specific department working with for education and training, and they provided a lot of alternatives for people that were in this age group, like from 18 to 25 years old or to 30 years old. And this is a resource that is almost for free, almost always for free. And sometimes people are just not aware of it. So that there's a lot going on in the community, and the social prescriber could let people know about these kind of options. That sometimes even I remember the Beacon of Light, they were looking for participants for their activity, and they tried to advertise it in a lot of places, a lot of GPs, a lot of healthcare centers, organizations. But once you have a person like a link worker, this guy or this girl or this woman or this man could help people know about these kind of useful resources that can change people's lives. And this young man that I was telling you about gained a lot of confidence. It helped him to make some connections after attending this program. He realized that he could try to make some of his life projects work, life plans work, and he actually moved to the US just for a summer camp, and started to get involved in sports because he was very into football, and he was like a personal coach for young kids, and this was one of his dreams. And then he spent some time in the US in a summer camp, then he came back and he enjoyed a lot the experience, and then he was expecting to go back to the US in the year after. So it was really good because it was just a little thing that made the difference in his life. And another guy that I remember in the same age group, he was not my client, if you want to call it like that. He was not my patient, but his mother was my patient. His mother was referred by the GP as a lady who was a little bit depressed. She was a frequent attender. She had all the medicines already prescribed. There was nothing more to do in terms of her medical condition, but she needed something else. So one of the things that I realized that could be helpful for this lady, who was actually started to feel depressed and lonely because she had a son I think her son was 20 years old at the time, and he spent most of his time in his bedroom. And she was starting to feel really, really depressed and worried about his future because he didn't move from the bedroom. He didn't go outside or outdoors, and she was starting to become very inactive as well. So one of the things she enjoyed doing was cooking, and there was actually just next to the practice to the primary care center where I was working, there was a community organization called Women Together Tala Network, and they were running a cooking classes, workshop, something like that. And I mentioned it to her because she was interested in cooking, making some desserts, and I told her, why not? I can bring you there. I can introduce you to people who are actually delivering this kind of workshops, and you just have a look, just talk with them, and then see if you don't want to engage, that's fine. We can look at other stuff. And that was it. We went together. She was there. She went there. She attended the workshop, and after that, she started to meet with other people. Some of them were neighbors, and she never talked with these neighbors that also attended the workshop, the cooking workshop. And after that, she felt a little bit more confident in starting to engage in more physical activity initiatives. Like one of her dreams was running a marathon, and she was a frequent walker. She used to walk a lot around the neighborhood, but she wasn't aware about the park runs. You probably heard about park runs. So she was not aware about park runs. And I mentioned park runs in some of the parks close to her house, and she started to attend park runs, and she started to bring her son with her. So this was one way to bring her son out of the house or outdoors. And after that, they started to do stuff together outside of the house, and that brought them some confidence and some joy that they didn't have at home. And one of the things that she mentioned, I remember this was one of our last conversations, was she felt a little bit more confidence in engaging in counseling sessions that she was looking for, but she was not motivated to do it. But now that she felt a little bit more confident, her son was a little bit more active, she started counseling sessions, and they actually, both of them, mom and son, started to fix some stuff that they had at the inside of the house, and they have been postponing like fixing, I can't remember what, inside of the house. And they spent years and years talking about fixing a specific part of their house, and then they started to fix that part of the house. So there were a lot of life changes just because, and all of this started with the social prescribing connection with the cooking class. And the cooking class brought a young man from the outdoor, from inside of the house to the outdoors, because his mom got confidence and was a little bit more less depressed. I mean, and this was like an indirect impact. I don't know if this makes sense, but I realized. Sorry.
Absolutely. Thanks for. No, I love hearing these personal accounts, Joe. It really does seem that we consistently underestimate the health impacts of social isolation and the health impacts of connection.
Yeah.
And just, I'm sure you're aware of this, but I feel like I have to say it, where I was doing a bit of research recently about social isolation. And there's this big, massive piece of research to say that social isolation was a bigger indicator for early death than type 2 diabetes, smoking a pack of cigarettes every day, in some cases, alcoholism. This is absolutely crazy to me, and I'm sure to many listeners, going, wow, we don't prioritize this connection that we need to really live a healthy life. And we're a bit tight on time, but I was just wondering, could you possibly tell us a bit about the bigger research in terms of social prescribing? You mentioned these
so
like personal
that's one of
anecdotes,
the
personal
main
accounts.
things that
But
I
is there
think all the
grander
countries who are
research to
actually
show
developing
also that we're
social
really
prescribing
moving in the right
services are
direction with
looking
the
for?
social prescribing?
Because there's the evidence of the benefits of social prescribing are visible when you talk with people that actually benefit from the service, but it's very hard to measure it in terms of what we call the well-being tools or validated tools in terms of research. And this is one of the things that there are a lot of groups at the moment. There's a National Academy of Link Workers. There's a lot of people that are getting more specialized in this particular subject, just to get a sense of what would be the best way to evaluate the impact of social prescribing in people's health and well-being. Just to give you an example, the project that I ran in South Dublin County Partnership was evaluated in two different ways. So we had, when I planned the project, I identified 3 tools that I used at the baseline, so in the first appointment with the patient, and then I administered these 3 tools in a follow-up stage just to check if there was any differences between the starting stage and the follow-up stage. And these tools were one well-being tool, and this is a validated tool that is very well known in the psychology world. It's a short Warwick well-being scale. And then there was another tool called MyCaw, so it means measure your self concerns and well-being. And the third one was a tool that I conceived just to realize if people increase their awareness about the social support, the amount of social supports that were available around the place where they lived, if they were aware of these supports, would they engage or would they try any of those? And if before and after trying the social prescribing service, if they felt that the connectivity with their own community has increased or not. So I use these 3 tools, but the problem is that the Warwick well-being scale is something that is being used by almost every social prescribing project, or if it's not this tool, it's another one very similar. But the thing is, we need to create a structure, an evaluation framework that is common to most of the projects, so we can get the most scientific evidence possible based in the same criteria, in the same tools. Because if I'm setting up a new project, I need to evaluate the feasibility of the project, the acceptability of the concept. I'm not in the same condition to evaluate like if people reduce the number of appointments with a GP. I'm not in the same conditions as a project that is running like 3 or 4 years ago that can get those kind of data. Do you know what I mean? So it's difficult because when projects are in different stages, you need to evaluate different stuff. Like I have a report, an evaluation report, an external evaluation from my pilot project. And what we decided was to make a qualitative evaluation with like interviews with the GPs, with patients, with stakeholders, with community services. But we also have the quantitative report that has to do with the improvements on the well-being scale or improvements in the other 2 tools that I mentioned. But it's very difficult to get like a strong evidence, scientific evidence. That's why I'm trying to remember the name of the national player that is trying to develop this framework. But I'm pretty sure that HSE is involved. I know that Elemental Software and S3 Solutions, and I can give you a little bit a little information about these 2. So these are digital innovation tools that are conceived for managing a social prescribing project through digital innovation. So I used a digital software to to manage the project. So GPs use the software to make referrals to me, and I use the software to make referrals to the community or to signpost stuff to people. So these, like HSC Elemental software, which is also maybe a good speaker to this kind of podcasts. It might be interesting for you guys if you want to explore more social prescribing in a digital platform point of view. They may be good guests. So these guys are working together as well as a group of GPs and people who are already involved in social prescribing in Ireland. They are involved in creating this framework to bring more evidence to this particular concept that has a lot of benefits to people's health and well-being. And in the UK, there's a lot of you can bring together a lot of information about different projects, and you can get the same findings. It's just a matter of trying to work on the same framework, use the same kind of tools, and maybe we can make the evidence work in terms of scientific research papers. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you. I mean, obviously, really, it's a very new thing, isn't it? Really, compared to other researchers and other older frameworks. But thank you for opening our eyes to social prescribing, giving us all these references that Jim and I can take further and maybe delve into social prescribing even more. But just thank you for opening our eyes to it, because I'm sure that a lot of our listeners have kind of never really thought of it, and like you said, always kind of look for a certain pill to help them with whatever ailment that may be, and just giving them this option that maybe there's something else out there that doesn't need to be taken in the pill form that could help you, could maybe help them massively. So thank you for that. We really appreciate your time, João. It's been excellent.
No worries. It was a pleasure. And sorry if I talked too much, but
not at all.
There's a lot to say about social prescribing, and we could stay here all day talking about it. So if you want to explore a little bit more about it, just let me know and we can talk about it later. Okay.
Perfect. I'm sure we'll take you up on that option. Thank you very much,
It was a pleasure. Big pleasure. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you.
If you want to explore a little bit more about it,
Appreciate that. Yeah.